Go.
Hi guys, and welcome back to episode number 37
Yeah.
of the PT Education Podcast with myself, James Shiby, and my good mate, Daniel Green.
Is that how we're going to do it now? Do one then.
Should we do that?
Me, James Shiby.
It's me, James Shiby,
Dan
here
Green.
again, every Thursday.
Yeah,
Committed.
do we need to introduce ourselves still?
I don't know, mate.
Dunno.
I thought it sounded good today.
We'll put it out there.
Just
do we,
cuff it now, don't we?
do we still need to introduce ourselves? That's a question.
Yeah, it's a question to people
To
out
the
there.
people, yeah.
Let us know.
Let us.
Do you give a shit what our names are?
Because I just spend 20 minutes talking about
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
like our friendship.
Some people do though, don't they? Some people read it every day. And
They do that pre-recorded
means such
thing,
and
don't
such,
they?
yeah. And we're like, I know who it is.
Yeah, I quite like the more raw thing.
Do you? Yeah, yeah.
Like we just come in and just start talking. But I know some people, those more produced ones, which ours isn't.
Definitely.
Well, we did have the cameraman in today to
Yeah.
set it up.
Yeah.
So we promised the YouTube video about 8 weeks in a row. I think this might be the one.
This could be the one.
Yeah.
This could be the one. You can actually see us on camera.
It goes off to our videographer, Eddie, after this
Yeah.
to be sorted. And then it should be up on YouTube with some clips coming out of it.
Yeah.
I
So
don't promise anything though.
people can see our little faces.
Yeah. I don't know if we need to introduce ourselves.
No, well, who knows? It
happens.
it happens, man. Just make it up as we go along. But what we're going to talk about today, Dan? Actually, no. Fuck it.
It's your turn. It's your turn.
Actually, mate, I was going to ask you how you're doing today, actually. Not that anyone really gives a shit, but let's just... How you getting on?
I'm pretty good actually. Started my online coaching with Paul Standell. As I said last week, been on the podcast. I wasn't actually on that podcast, but he was on the podcast. It's quite nice to get into tracking some data again. I've done it previously, but obviously, just tracking things that you think are going okay, you think you're mindful of, but actually it's quite nice to duck back into the game. Things like sleep, just tracking your sleep. I'm not getting super geeky on it, like we did last week, but just thinking about like how long am I sleeping for, tracking my steps properly again, which I haven't done in ages. Obviously tracking calories and macros and things, interesting to see where they are. Tracking things like fibre, which I don't keep that close an eye on. So stuff that I like to think I'm fairly on top of, just with general behaviours. It's nice tracking it again to see am I. And of course, as always, there's a couple of things, need to fucking progress that a little bit and pulse it out all my targets. So a little bit of a dieting phase going into leading between now and Christmas. Maintenance / don't put on too much fucking weight at Christmas, can't promise Paul. And then from January through to a couple of stag do's, just get my shredded and massive, which leads nicely into today, so I'm going to get into it. But yeah, I'm just basically going to be shredded and massive, mate. You know, it happens sometimes,
That's what
doesn't
we
it?
all want, mate, isn't it? Can I get bigger and lose fat at the same time? Which is going to be what we're going to talk about this week, isn't it?
It is. No.
What are we going to talk about?
No. Right, it's been a good podcast today. We'll catch you next week. Do you want to introduce it? How are you first, mate?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks, mate. Yeah, just you're talking about kind of your coaching stuff. For me, yeah, I'm doing a lot more work on my psychology stuff at the moment.
Yeah.
So my kind of counselling course, which is really good because it's making me make time to develop that side of my sort of education. But also, sometimes it's quite nice to listen to like stuff in health and fitness that isn't psychology focused or is totally different. It's nice to listen to like random podcasts sometimes. And this morning I was listening to a good podcast talking about epigenetics, which is a really fascinating area actually, and one that I haven't studied loads, but I like the narrative around it because it's a really empowering narrative around epigenetics, which again, from my very basic understanding, is just looking at how our lifestyle and our behaviours influence our genes, essentially. And a lot of people will say, oh, I'm genetically predisposed to something. Yes, we all have a set of genes we are born with, but as I always say, genetics loads a gun and lifestyle pulls a trigger. So it's a very empowering message for people because quite often people are disempowered by their genetics. And this will also link into today's podcast that we can all improve, can't we? We can all develop and we can all take control of our life, but some of us will respond differently to our environment, and it's looking at that, isn't it? So I found that quite an interesting listen actually, and it's fucking hell, it's an area you can go quite deep in. But epigenetics is something that I have found interesting and quite empowering.
So in terms of how you're able to, you get a set of genetics, which of course we're all born with, but then based upon how you live your lifestyle, you're able to affect those genetics both positively and negatively.
And it's whether or not those genes switch off and on. So on the podcast, they were talking a lot about females being predisposed to breast cancer,
right,
and looking at the genes that they have that would predispose them to to cancer, and they studied this, and only 50% of the women who had the genes got cancer. So 50% of the women who had the cancer gene didn't get it.
Right.
So we've got to look at lifestyle and nutrition and health and well-being holistically to go, well, we can influence these things. Now, this is something we're still learning a lot more about, and I think our knowledge is really in its infancy, but it's really empowering. It's a bit like when you learn about the brain and you look at the wiring of the brain. It will come to me in a second, mate, where the brain can adapt and grow and the neurons can
Neuroplasticity?
change. That's it, mate.
There you go.
Spot on. We did talk about it, so I just lost the name of it. Thanks for that, mate. So neuroplasticity, which is also really empowering, because we think of our brains, maybe anyway, as a certain way. Oh, I'm good at this or I'm bad at this. And yes, we all have certain character traits and things we might be naturally better at, but we can all grow and develop and literally change how our minds are wired. And I find that quite empowering with some of the psychodynamic psychology that I'm learning about, because it has kind of a neuroscience backing quite often. So we've actually got some hard data and science to back up why we're talking about emotions and feelings and our past and how we're getting on mentally. That can actually start to rewire the brain, which again is just so exciting and so empowering as a health and wellness coach, mate, I find.
So and you might not have the answer to this, so you have to have the gene if you're going to get breast cancer, is that what they're saying? So there's a certain gene that can develop into breast cancer.
Yeah.
So for women that don't have that gene, is it like a 0% chance they'll get breast cancer?
Who knows, mate? Yeah, I mean, from my
basic... Obviously, I know you don't know that. It's just an idea that ran through my mind there.
Yeah, because we do even know about people. We all know people who have like smoke, they drink, and they're in the 90s and they're fine.
Yeah.
You know, and people are like, well, how have they done it?
Yeah.
And then 40-year-old Bob, who's been doing really well, has got cancer. And you're like, you know, genes obviously are a part of the equation, but it's how our genes interact with our environment is ultimately the area that we're learning more about. And that's interesting because it links a lot into, again, psychology as well, doesn't it, as I've just been saying.
Whose podcast was it, just in case anyone fancies listening to it?
Dr. Chattery.
Oh, right,
yeah. Dr. Chattery. He has some really good guests on, to be fair. And one I like to just keep an eye on. And if I hear, it's like you flip through the podcast titles and I'll give that a little listen.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed that. So it was a little side note, wasn't it? But hopefully, guys listening, if you want to learn a little bit more about epigenetics and neuroplasticity, those two areas, I think I've just personally fascinating and
neuroplasticity,
really empowering.
Because
we can change, can't we?
That's where the people are like, oh no, that's just how I am. It's like, well, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe you can work on that. Depends whether it's positive or negative. So getting massive and shredded.
Yeah, so that is, it's surprising we haven't actually spoken about it too much, have we, really? In all of our 37 or 36 podcasts previously, what's our bread and butter as a personal trainer is muscle building and fat loss. That's a lot of the goals that our clients come in for, and how we go about coaching it, how we go about understanding it. And we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the geeky science. I think Dan's going to talk a little bit more about that, but also some of the sort of pragmatic stuff us as coaches like to implement to help our clients build muscle, with fat loss as well, maybe some of our own journey, because it's a massive part of what we do, isn't it? It's a big focus for a lot of clients coming to see us. It's not the only focus.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think the terminology, and I know I've had this a lot with both male and female clients over the years, although that certainly changed with female clients, I think, for the positive, is that they want to build muscle, but they want to look toned. But of course, what we realise is, well, they're one of the same thing. You want to build a little muscle and you want to lose a little bit of body fat, and that is what's going to make you look toned. But of course, there's many other things that come with resistance and strength training alongside building muscle, if that's your goal, in terms of bone density, which I'm sure we'll do a women's health one at some point, which is really interesting. Starts to move towards the menopause and maybe decreasing bone density. But bone density, joint health, strength health, ligament health, we look at all these different things. The resistance training is hugely impactful on people for their health. But if we keep it where the topic is, I find a lot of people say they don't want to get too big.
I'll just write it down, mate.
Do you know what I mean? Don't want to get too big.
I don't get too big.
I think that's because they're training you and me. I don't want to be as big as you, mate.
Yeah, I don't want to get too massive, mate. Don't, mate. I've been trying a long time.
Mate, it takes years, and effectively speaking, most of us never even get to where we think we can get to anyway, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, it's difficult. And I know in my younger career, I wouldn't have judged them, but maybe in my head, I'll be laughing at them a little bit, thinking, you're not going to get massive after 6 weeks. But of course, it comes from, well, like me and you trying to set up the camera a minute ago and Eddie being here. Don't know what he's talking. you do get this concept of people think, if I don't want to get too massive, I rock up to the gym, I'm going to get massive. What I see with a lot of people as well is that maybe they do get a bit bulky. It's not because they put a lot of muscle on, that's because they put fat on. So that happens to people when they train. But yeah, there's a tendency from general population to not want to get too big, maybe think it's a lot easier than what it is to put a good amount of muscle on. And we see that a lot. And earlier in my career, I found that people turned off wanting to do too much resistance training. I think it's turning now. People are wanting to be training, wanting to be more toned or muscular. I certainly see that with more females now. They want to put on a good bit of muscle. They want to look toned. They want to be strong, which I think is great, really positive that everyone's now working towards that. And what about you, mate? Have you had lots of clients over the years telling you they want to get too massive?
Yeah, that's what I was joking, relating to what you said there, mate. Yeah, I suppose general population, if they really are from the outside of the gym, they're really looking in from the outside. And when you walk into a gym and you see people with muscle and stuff, you think, oh, I'll do some weight training, I'm going to be like bulking up. You're like, these people have been training for like decades often. And they're trained 5 times a week with a lot of volume and they're nailing it. Like, don't think you're going to end up like that in 6 months. So it's always marrying people's expectations to reality, because some people might want to get big as well, and they might want to put a decent level of muscle on. You're like, okay, that will take time, that will be a process. So as we always come back to, it is having that conversation with clients, isn't it, to help educate them or re-educate them to understand what we are doing when we're resistance training and maybe what their body's going through. And yeah, we're going to hear a lot of unhelpful beliefs, aren't we, from the outside coming in. So it's our job to, as you say, to have empathy for that. If we'd never weight trained before and we were viewing the gym, if you go into the gym that we both train at, a lot of people are in quite good shape. So if you don't know anything about those people, you walk into that gym environment, you might think, oh, I'll just lift some weights and do a few bicep curls and suddenly I've got a massive set of guns. We all wish it was that easy.
We do.
But it ain't, mate.
I mean, you can theoretically put some muscle on and lose some fat at the same time, especially for newbies and in certain circumstances. But once you get into once you're getting past 6 months, a year, and you're getting into a regular lifter, you're becoming more advanced, it's very, very difficult. Putting on a lot of muscle, you're going to require, as James was alluding to, intensity, volume, really knowing what you're doing, get enough time in the gym, nutrition needs to be good. You're going to need to be in maintenance, probably a slight surplus in reality. And when you're losing body fat, and you are going to probably put some body fat on if you're taking it to that level, and going to need to then reduce calories at some point. So it can happen. Newbies. That's why sometimes getting someone in, when you get a new person in who really wants to take it on, and all of a sudden you can get them into a slight calorie deficit, but they're in as well doing some good resistance training, someone can look quite different. 6, 8, 12 weeks, a real newbie. They can make some big changes. The body reacts quite well. It's the first time they've done it. Novel stimulus coming in. Don't need to take it that hard to do training more than they were before, and they're losing body fat. Then you're going to make some big differences to their physique quite early on, and they're going to feel so much better as well. Yeah,
and it's true, isn't it? It's kind of, if someone's got no training experience and they've got a basic program, so they just train 3 times a week. You do a year of that, you're going to should see some nice changes. Yeah. And you're right, you can put on some muscle in a calorie deficit. Yeah. Definitely with these newbies. Anyway. Yeah. Unfortunately, as you're saying, as your training age goes on, that's just going to be unrealistic. So yeah, it's an exciting time for clients, isn't it? If they're just getting into weight training, seeing out those kind of physique changes. I think we can really kind of push people on, and they can develop the kind of love for exercise. So it comes back to getting results, doesn't it? And putting on muscle is a nice, for men and for women. I think it's very empowering, and it's a great thing. Our physiques generally look. Who doesn't want to look a little bit better? Yeah. Ultimately, people go, "Do you want to look a bit better?" Yeah, I'll happy with that. I'll look a bit better. Yeah. And actually, most of us, subjective, isn't it, I suppose, but generally a bit more muscle and a bit more an athletic looking physique is generally thought of as maybe more attractive, and the people that we see, that's maybe the type of look they want to go for. I suppose we do need to understand, and they do, like, what is it they're aiming for? Are they looking, is it a female, she wants to be a bikini competitor in 12 months? You're like, okay, let's kind of marry in these expectations here. Is it a bloke who's like, you know what, mate, this time next year I want to look like that? And you're like, okay, I love that. We can move towards that, but the idea you've got maybe isn't realistic.
Love that, but you can't do it.
Well, yeah.
Not quite said like that.
I don't work with too many of those types of clients now, but it has been in the past where, men specifically have come in and said, you know what, I want to look like such and such. I'm like, great. The person you're thinking about is a celebrity. They're training 5 times a week. They've trained for a decade, and they've probably got some enhanced help as well. So what you're comparing yourself to is totally, you're training twice a week.
Yeah.
So that sometimes can be a really important conversation with like physique development, which is what we're talking about.
And of course, the big thing is the muscle building takes so much longer.
Yeah.
In reality, once you get past those initial stages, the muscle building takes so much longer than fat loss. It's one of the things, if you are going through, say, a gaining phase, you see as you work through that, your performance is going to be pretty good. You're going to feel pretty good in the gym. You're going to be lifting some good weights. Depending on where you decide your cut-off point is for, I'm just going to have a little tidy up, I'm just going to have a little cut just to take off some of the edges. Although you look bulkier with your top off, you don't necessarily look that great for a gaining phase, and it's trusting the process. It's trusting the fact that I am training with good intensity, I'm training at good volume, my performance is improving on a consistent basis. You have to rely on those factors that you're building some good quality muscle underneath without really being able to see it until you come through and you start to lean up, and then you really start to see what's going on underneath. So there is some trusting within that, and that's why when you first get people in, especially if they're carrying a little bit of body fat anyway, to put them in a better position to grow some muscle, it is nice to start with a little lean up. A little dieting phase for the majority of people, unless you're getting someone coming who's fucking lean and shredded and wants to go. Physique coaches may well get that a lot, who just actually their physique's amazing and they just want to take it to the next level, and it's like, how do I get from this show to that show or whatever? Or how do I start getting into shows? But for the majority of us with general population clients, most of the clients that I see, they're going to serve well from losing a little bit of body fat. Even if I'm going to put some resistance training in there first, lose a little body fat, get some confidence that they're looking a bit better. Plus, it's going to be better for them and their health if they're carrying a little bit less body fat, which is going to make it easier to put on some muscle mass.
Yeah, and even people who've trained for a while, to be fair, as a coach, which we're going to talk about today, like mechanical tension.
Yeah.
People might have had 3 or 4 years training experience or training age, but they haven't trained like with proper intensity. And we can all relate to this as personal trainers. When you get client in who has trained for a while and they're like, bloody hell, I've never trained like that before. I can really feel my lats, I can feel my pecs, I can feel my arms really engaging in just a couple of sets. That's like a whole new stimulus. So you've got a whole new stimulus for that person, and then you also put them in a slight deficit. Definitely, we can see some nice physique changes even for the people who have got more experience but haven't really trained to the level that they need to get the result that they want. So again, it's just going, right, this is what you want to achieve, mate. You get some bigger legs. Let's get in that leg press. It's going to be fucking painful. And then they go, right, you know what? I can do this. Now you take them to another level. That's quite exciting to see that kind of that notch in people's heads. We're like, okay, shit, I thought I was training hard before. Now that's another level. And we've mentioned this in previous podcasts, but if we can talk about muscle building, after the first year, mentally you've got to constantly just push yourself. Otherwise, your physique isn't really going to change.
That's why people sack off legs.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's really important here, mate, is actually understanding. Okay, look, right now you've built some muscle and you've lost a bit of fat. Great. Now, where do you want to go with your physique? Do you want to push further? Well, like you've just said, great. We're going to need a surplus of calories now, so you're going to have some body fat to go on, and we're going to look at strength. We're going to look at performance. I'm going to train fucking hard. And if someone's in that, great. But if they're like, I don't quite want to eat too much, I want to stay lean, you're like, great. Well, the trade-off will be you'll put on limited muscle, or maybe just keep your physique the same and maintain it. Also fine, but it's got to be that conversation, hasn't it? Otherwise, what people want to what they're doing don't marry. So as trainers, I think it's so important when clients are at a, especially transitional stage, we go, right, if you want to go down this path here, this is what it's going to take. And if you want to maintain, that's also fine because you've done really well. That needs to come from the client, doesn't it, really? And then we need to decide, okay, if that's what you want, are your actions and the dedication and the discomfort you want to experience, is that in line with what you want to get? Because you might go, I want to look really shredded for a fucking stag do. You know what, Paul, I don't want to get too uncomfortable. And Paul's going to be like, wait on, Dan, you want to get really lean, mate, it's going to get a bit uncomfortable. So you have to embrace that discomfort. Otherwise, there's just a mismatch in what you want to what you're willing to put in.
Yeah, I said to Paul, I want to get massive shredded, but I don't really want to train. I don't want to keep living as I am with just getting smashed up every week. Yeah. Not that's actually how I do, but maybe close to Christmas.
We've got a cup on, mate.
Yeah, World Cup is on, fucking hell, yeah. Don't worry, we'll be out in about fucking 3 weeks. It is the reality of it, and we'll talk in a minute about the driving to enough fatigue as well within the muscle, and it's, you don't realise how hard. That's one of the things that courses really helped me with. When I went on M10 or RTS, or when I've trained with Michael, it's or other trainers like yourself or Luke and Ryan or whoever, who actually are going to push you. That's quite nice. What a training partner's for. I did for the camera the other day. I've got to start doing some video, which isn't my thing at all, but do some videos of me training just for Paul, so he can obviously see is it set up right on a few things. Which of course it is. But the other thing is how hard am I training? Probably more importantly. And I banded up the hack and I was feeling good. I saw some posts on the hack. Don't always need to band it. Just throw that out there. But Paul's got it banded in my program. So banded the hack and it felt brutal. I put on a chunk more weight than I had before. I was like, this video for Paul. And it was fucking hard. I got back to 6 or maybe got 7 reps and I was sort of shaking, as you would say, like a shitting dog.
Yep.
Got to the top and I thought, right, now let's see how that video looked. I probably had 4 reps left.
Really?
Yeah. Because when I was in it...
That's balls out, mate. It ain't, mate, is it?
It's only at that moment...
Don't bullshit yourself there, mate.
At that moment, my legs were shaking. I thought I'd got stuck about halfway up. I didn't have a spot at the time. I was like, no, that felt pretty good. I reckon maybe another rep or so, but that's fine. He'd programmed me maybe a couple of reps in reserve. I fucking watched the video. You fucking melt. There was another 4 reps in there, probably. Paul might even say like 5 or 6. But you don't know that because what you're feeling in the moment isn't what people are actually seeing. So I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, depending on the client and what they're looking for, because if I strapped everyone like that, probably half my clients would leave. But in the right client at the right moment, it's like you're pushing them to that level, and I know what I'm looking for within the training to know whether they're nearly finished. I'm looking at the speed of the rep. One of the big things that you can really notice if someone's driving to that point of failure or a couple of reps in reserve is they are pushing as they want to move quickly, but they fucking can't.
Yeah.
You know, when you get to that point, and then you can see they're trying to push everything they're trying to push, and that thing is moving slow as fuck. That's when you know someone's getting to fatigue. Now that's what I thought was happening. That's how I felt. I paused halfway out. That's what I felt. When I watched the video, it wasn't really a pause. And so the reality of what I'm feeling versus the reality of what an external, not going through that moment would be, more of an objective view of what was actually it looked like, was so different. And actually, that was a bit of a lesson for me in my training, was actually, I'm just going to video stuff. Obviously, we're going to do a session, aren't we? And we'll do the odd session together. But I quite like training on my own. Going a bit off tangent now, but because I'm spending all day with people, my training's my hour. Not that I'm going to bump into people in the gym and talk to them, but my training's my hour. I like to have my
Fuck off, James. This is my hour, mate.
You know, like that.
Don't talk to me.
Sat there on the chest press, someone coming over like that, fucking hell, turn it up.
Headphones on. No eye contact.
But the video, what a great way of them. Yeah. It's an objective view. The video's making no judgment. It's just showing me what's going on, and so I can then look at that and be like, I had more reps in there. So what a great way of knowing whether you're driving to enough fatigue.
It sounds like an obvious and a basic one, but it's one that a lot of people just aren't able to achieve on their own.
Yeah.
So as you said, training partners, as long as you've got the right training partner, is great. So a training partner who does train hard, who's achieved something with their physique, a coach, or a course. And I've been fortunate enough to expose myself to all of those, and they've all been really valuable. You know, and you can always. It's always just trying to go to another level. If you want to progress your physique to another level. Again, if we're training general population, I've got Betty on the leg extension. Does she need to go to complete absolute failure and partials and drop downs?
Imagine.
Of course she does. Of course she does. Betty was massive quads. So, you know, we have to think about, again, the appropriate stress at the appropriate time. And I suppose we do for ourselves as well. We can't all train balls out every single session, every week of the year. But ultimately, there's got to be times when we really do push and go, look, am I trying to progress here?
Just maybe you train with your balls out. How are we training with my balls out, mate?
Do you train your balls out all the time? No.
Just on leg day.
Now and again, mate.
Leg day.
The shorts are really short. But
I completely agree.
It's something that a lot of people think they're training hard. And they ain't.
No.
It's as simple as that. Sounds harsh.
I've written down there, do you train hard enough?
Yeah, so it's
and it's
I've said it before, but ultimately, if you're trying to progress any area of your life, and you want to get more out of it, you have to put more into it. And an obvious one with training and building muscle is you've got to put more fucking effort into it. You can talk all day about mechanics and getting it right. And we've said this so much throughout the years. You're like, I love all that. Stimulate the muscles, get the coaching points right. If you're not training hard enough, none of that counts for shit.
It's the balance of both, because the level that you have to train hard enough at. So when we talk about mechanics, when we talk about this, people quite rightly say people got massive before we had an understanding of mechanics because they trained fucking hard. And that's true. one of the things that we might be looking at is your training lifetime. So are we able to create exercises where you can train fucking hard, get the mechanical tension that we want, which I'll explain in a bit, but also not fuck the joint? So can we find this balance that's going to increase our training age, that we can continue to train really hard for a long period of time? Because of course, if your joint's starting to break down, then your central nervous system isn't going to produce as much force around that joint. It's going to get protected. It's going to hurt as well. And pain's going to be a protective mechanism to stop you doing that, because if it's starting to degenerate, then, which all joints will, but if it's degenerated to the point where you can't train hard enough, that's going to affect what you can do. Well, can we create a way where you can still train fucking hard, you can still progress, but maybe we can do it in a way where we're not going to break down or potentially create so much degeneration in the joints? And that's really where mechanics comes in, because we're going to look at mechanical tension, but if you don't train hard enough, it doesn't matter. If you've got the most optimal quotations, and I can actually do it with the fucking camera now, set up in the world, but you're bailing out every set with 10 reps in reserve, you're going to plateau. Maybe not initially, but you will fairly quickly. So it's this thing where people want to go, oh no, it's all about optimal. Oh no, it's all about training hard. Well, how about we go, actually it's probably a bit about both. Can we bring them both in? Can we train really good exercises that set up really well for us? And that can be a fucking barbell squat, because I know in mechanics it gets like some of these big compound movements that are great get demonized, which they shouldn't. But can we set up really well for the person, and then you need to train hard enough in order to get those adaptations over a period of time. The body will only adapt if it's forced to. It's not going to adapt otherwise. So it's like, can we really train to that? But a quick caveat on that, because everything should be caveated. What training hard looks like is different for different people at different stages. So what a first-time client who's coming in and they want to feel like they're training hard, and you want to push them to create an adaptation, that intensity is different to a client that's been training pretty hard for 10 years. So yes, I'm still wanting that maybe 1 or 2 reps in reserve, but that looks different, and we need to be aware of that. I mean, years ago, I remember doing walking lunges with a day one client. He had to take work, he was a builder, he had to take took time off work for a week because his legs were fucked. And yeah, they should have been, and they were. So again, it's understanding, well, when am I going to select a certain exercise, and when do I put that in? When's right for that person? And a lot of the exercises I look for initially are ones where I can control the intensity. Sometimes with a split squat, as a day one exercise, can be quite hard to control then how much the DOMs are going to be, and maybe what that experience is going to be like for someone, because a newbie's not necessarily going to like really savage DOMs, and we'll get on to a minute why maybe none of us really should be looking for that. But where's there an exercise where I can get them training pretty hard, but I'm in control of that intensity and that volume, where hopefully they feel like they train the next day, but they're not absolutely battered. And again, that's going to look different from person to person. Because we've all made the mistake, we've all been on courses and come back and been like, right, you're fucking getting strapped in today. Paul tells the story a lot on the podcast he was on here, where he's come off mechanics. And the reason I use him as an example with the story is that he actually had a couple of clients be like, I'm not enjoying training this hard. But that's not what I'm enjoying. What I want to progress, and I want to do the workouts, but you're pushing me to a bodybuilder level of intensity that I don't want to train at. And that's not what I'm looking for. And so it's really important that we always bring it back to the client.
Yes, that experience again, isn't it?
Always.
If you've ever...
Do you want some coffee, mate?
Yeah, have a little bit top up, mate. Go for it.
Fucking top up.
I remember if you're going to do anything tough physically and you know it's going to be really horrible, you get these kind of nerves beforehand because you think, I'm going to be going to a dark place mentally.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, and
hack squat balls out,
hack squat, or even stuff in the army. I remember basic training. Like before every session, I'd be like, I get nervous because I'd be like, I know people are going to be getting sick. I know we're going to be here for how many hours, and you'd be like nervous beforehand of just the pain you're going to be experiencing. Maybe clients don't want that. Maybe they're thinking, you know what, I'm happy to work hard, but I don't want to be nervous before session. James is going to be absolutely killing me.
See what mood changes.
I've been there, mate. Clients would come in like when I was a lot younger.
Yeah.
Probably like mid-20s. Clients were like, I was a little bit nervous coming today. Why? Because I know it's going to be horrible. And I would smash the shit out of people. People puking up left, right and centre.
And they stay.
Some of them did do, but obviously some of them didn't. So you kind of, you feed out the weak ones. So yeah, it was savage. But going back to what you say about stress, mate, it's all about the appropriate stress at the appropriate time. That's what you're saying, isn't it? So it can cause adaptation, but it's not always
Camera's off, we're just going to flick it back
It's not
on.
always more is better, is it?
No. It's not always more is better. It's what we've got the minimal effective dose, we've got the maximal effective dose, because you do get the law of diminishing returns as well. So just adding more and more and more and more and more isn't going to get you the return you want to get. So in fact, it's going to lead to, not only is it, it's going to lead to diminish. Like if it's not right for you, you start doing 7 days a week, couple of days a week, a couple of times a day. For your general population client, that's not going to get you any, well, at a certain point, you're going to miss out on stuff rather than gain stuff. And so as you say, for some clients initially, especially maybe older ones, maybe I'm looking for the minimal effective dose because I don't want them to be hurt. I don't want them to not enjoy the session, but I need to give them something that's going to allow them to start to progress. Because of course, if you're not even giving them the minimum effective dose, then effectively you're not doing anything.
Well, effective dose is the word effective.
Yeah, that's the important word.
It needs to be effective.
Not the minimum,
doesn't it? Yeah.
The minimal effective dose. And then you could go to the maximal effective dose, which is maybe your more advanced people. Because once you get past the maximal effective dose, then it's becoming ineffective even if you do more. So you've got, but in that, you've got a spectrum, right? You've got the minimum effective dose, the maximum effective dose. Now, what that looks like from person to person, as you said, comes with experience of working with people, and probably is quite important why you're used to training yourself and being trained yourself, so that you know what it feels like and you know the changes you can make as well. I'm
just going to add to that.
Yeah, add, mate.
Just with the stress side, we're talking a lot about kind of what's the right amount of like physical stress, and trying to get as much knowledge in as possible, as much information as possible to formulate the best decisions.
Yeah.
So how long have they trained, their training experience, age, injury, whatever. As much information as we can get and our own personal experience working with clients to formulate what's going to be the appropriate dosage. Now, I think two parts of this. First part is I'm also taking into consideration their psychology a bit. So especially, I suppose, a bit of a bias working with people with pain, but often I know their body can probably cope with more, but they're so nervous and so cautious about movement. I'm going to give them such a small dosage, more just to build confidence up. I'm not looking for any physiological adaptation. I'm more looking for psychological adaptation because I'm trying to change their beliefs. And that's something we don't always consider in the PT world. Yet we like to help people with injury and pain. And yes, physiological adaptation is important, but psychological adaptation is important. If I'm so busy chasing the physiological, I could be like, someone might get DOMS in their lower back, and they might be fine with that, but they're nervous about their lower back. Maybe I don't want to come back again because on my lower back ache, that means it's bad. So I think psychological adaptation is as important. Often you get the two go hand in hand, but sometimes I've got clients that are a bit older and they're quite cautious. I'm just trying to create that nice environment, which I know you spoke about before, mate. There was another point, but I forgot my other point, so I'll come back to it, mate.
Yeah,
I will remember it in a minute.
So when we look at muscle building, normally what the things you'll hear, the mechanisms you'll hear is mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. This is some of the work I'm taking from Luke Hoffman, or formerly of the Muscle Mentors. I think triage method now is where Luke is. And he was talking a lot of study that he did where is actually, they're quite hard to separate, because if you train well, then how do you separate certainly mechanical tension from metabolic stress? Because you're going to get that build up, of course, going to get the mechanical tension. So how do you separate them to know how they work independently of each other? But muscle damage is one of those things where Luke was alluding to a study where they actually damaged the muscle, and did that lead to any hypertrophy? I'll come back to what hypertrophy is in a minute. And the answer was no. And so one of the things they're really thinking about now is actually mechanical tension being the most important factor, along with driving enough stress and fatigue into it by working hard enough to actually creating hypertrophy. Hypertrophy being different to hyperplasia. So you don't proliferate more cells like hyperplasia, like something like cancer would be, where something is actually growing. Hyperplasia is an increase in hypertrophy is an increase in cell size, either in diameter or in length. So that's why when you see in a bicep, that bulge, and I'm using an example from Luke Hoffman now, the bulge is because you get an increase in length of the muscle, so effectively it's bulging up. So really that's what we're looking for. The cells have increased, they've increased in length, so in parallel series. So because of that, you're getting an increase, that's what you're getting an increase in cell size, not an increase in the amount of cells themselves. An increase in the amount of cells themselves is hyperplasia, so separate things. And I believe just from, I remember from his videos, they have seen that in other, I believe in certain animals, but not in humans has it ever been found. So it's hypertrophy, which is an increase in cell size. So really we're understanding that probably mechanical tension, as we understand now, mechanical tension is the biggest player. Mechanical tension for us is the muscle working. The muckle. It's a bit excited there. The muckle working. The muscle being under tension for a considerable period of time. So being under tension that whole time. And then you have to drive enough fatigue in order for that muscle to grow. The way that the central nervous system organises things is that the smaller muscles will be involved first. This is to enable us to do intricate movements such as writing, because it will always be arranged in the same series. Because otherwise, I couldn't write. If all the big muscles just kicked in, especially my muscles, mate, then I'll be...
Outside your muscles, Dan. It'd be nightmare,
fucking nightmare. Or you'd have to sprint everywhere. Or, your writing would be jagged. So the small, intricate movements, they're going to start first, which means the smaller muscles are fired up first. And then as you work through, the bigger muscles can come into play. And then I'm just going to take one step back. If we think about the muscles that have the most potential to have the biggest growth, it's going to be the bigger muscles. So you're going to see a bigger increase in things like pecs and lats and quads and these bigger muscles than you are small intricate muscles. So for us to get to the point of fatiguing them, we need to be at pretty much the point of, somehow told me I'm doing some steps. We're going to need to get to the point of where we're at proper fatigue, where you literally can't pull any more, because that's when those bigger, more powerful muscles are going to have been trained to the stimulus that they need to be trained to. The way that I see, I think I've just said this, I feel like I'm repeating myself. I've just said this within clients. The way that I'll look at that if I'm training someone hard enough is that they are trying to pull as hard as they possibly, or push, doesn't matter what the exercise is, pull as hard as they possibly can, as quick as they possibly can, and that thing is still moving slowly. So even though that their intention is to be as powerful with that thing as possible, that resistance is basically matching them, and you've got to that point of fatigue within the set. And that's why reps in reserve is a nice little thing. The job of reps in reserve is subjective, as happened to me the other day. So even someone who's experienced in training, my feel of what was going on fucking wasn't what the camera said. So, but as coaches, that's what we're looking for. If we're training someone to that level, they're fucking trying they're giving it absolutely everything. They're trying to fucking kick that quad extension up as quickly as they possibly can. And that thing is just barely moving. That's how I look. If I'm training someone to that level, that's how I look at their training to enough fatigue. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for mechanical tension, which is the mechanical tension for us is muscle. Muscle is the thing that can create active tension. Get this actin and myosin cross-bridging, sliding filament theory. Oh no, I'm right in the middle of something as well.
Oh no.
Sorry, team.
Unbelievable.
Back in 2 seconds.
So, I'm going to have to cough it now, Dan. So I suppose Dan's obviously going a bit geekier now in the actual science behind muscle building, which I think is important. I think it's good to have a bit of understanding in why we're doing what we're doing. So with what Dan's explaining there about taking a client to fatigue and what you're looking for about the speed of the movement, having a bit of understanding, would you agree, Dan, of the science behind it, helps us with the application of it. Would that be a fair thing to say?
I think so. And then knowing
we can get too geeky, can't we, as well?
Yeah.
Like I find sometimes if I go too far down a rabbit hole, I'm like, hang on, I'm moving too much away from the practical application. And I suppose if you're a PT, the practical application, the skill of how you apply the knowledge to the client, which in this type of case we're talking about how you apply mechanical tension. Hence why, on our course, for example, there is a lot of practical side to it. There's a big practical side to how you place mechanical tension and how you go about it. Because we're talking about theory all day long. For a lot of trainers, it might get a little bit boring and we can go so far down it, you forget about the practical. But on the other side, learning more about the science, as long as we can draw that science in and apply it and relate it to what we're doing, then we've got value with the science, because we can go too far either way, can't we? Just practical or just so sciencey, draw that science in, make it practically applicable, if this makes sense, then we've got a good bit amount of value. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, because it's things like, if we know that right now we can be maybe confident in that muscle damage isn't a particularly good indicator of muscle growth, hypertrophy. So what we shouldn't be looking for is a fuckload of DOMs every time people train.
Does DOMs always relate to muscle damage?
Yeah, delayed onset muscle. So if you're going to be getting DOMs, like proper DOMs, like where you can't really move for a period of time, then that's probably going to be muscle damage. Because the problem is you're not going to be able to recover then to get your volume in, because we're talking about the volume and we're talking about the intensity in terms of getting enough in across a week and then across a block and forward. If you're always just fucking battered, then recovery is going to be down, sleep may be down, stress on the body is going to be increased, appetite might be all over the place, but more importantly, your performance in the gym. Because what I want from clients is them to perform depending on the level I'm going to set. But I also need them to be able to, if I'm going to train 5 days a week, if I'm fucking battered after each day, I'm going to probably increase my chances of injury. But also, I'm not going to be able to perform that. Well, if I've got 4 or 5 days DOMs and I've got another legs day to do, well, my performance in that second legs day isn't going to be good. So I'd be more worried about, can we get really good performance in the gym and get good recovery? Which is why, if you're a bit achy the next day, that's not a problem. But we've all felt through programs where that novel stimulus is just creating DOMs in the first place. But then as we start to work through a program, you get less of that DOMs. Not because you haven't worked as hard, but you're just managing the amount of stress that you're placing upon the body within that given session. But if you're constantly chasing DOMs and that feeling of being absolutely battered, then that at the moment what the research and what a lot of people are saying is that actually that's not necessarily a good indicator of creating muscle. I mean, how often would you say, I'm not saying like little bit, I can feel I've trained, I mean proper like DOMs, would you say you get?
So, I mean, if anyone wants to research this stuff more, Brad Schoenfeld is fantastic at this sort of stuff. So the more conditioned you are, the less likely you are to get DOMs because your muscles are more used to those stresses. Mm-hmm. So now I would get maybe more of I did legs the other day and tried to push it and could just feel like the next day I could feel there was what do you call DOMs? I could feel some
That's the trouble, it's subjective side, isn't it? Because is achiness and DOMs the same thing?
Yeah, and exactly. And also when a client comes and says I'm really achy, like what do they actually really mean by that? So it's a bit of a grey area, I would say. But bringing it back into, you mentioned research, I mentioned Brad Schoenfeld there. The thing about muscle building, we know we need a bit of frequency. Yeah. We know just training muscle group once a week probably isn't the most optimal way to do it. Probably want at least twice a week. Maybe some more advanced people, they might win 3 times a week if they really try and specialise on a muscle group, but at least twice a week. So going back to the pragmatic application there, Dan, is the fact that if I'm smashing the fuck out of my legs on a Monday and I'm not that conditioned to it, and I've got DOMs for like the next week, you're right, I can't train them again, or if I could, it's not particularly effective dosage. So this is where less is more, and maybe breaking down programs to go, right, maybe I can just do a little bit less volume on legs here, but I could put in a bit of upper body, depending on someone's training experience, and then split it up throughout the week, which is what you and me talked about years ago, wasn't it? It's actually that frequency to get that kind of muscle protein synthesis up-regulated more often would probably lead to a more optimal outcome if your goal is muscle building, and that's where just more is better isn't always the case. Typical bloke, isn't it? It's like just do chest all day on a Monday, but then they're not training for another week. You're better off halving your dosage. Make sure performance is good. So we've talked about total volume load before. Like get a good amount of intensity in there. By the time you've done that, you're on that third exercise for chest, the intensity's starting to drop because your muscle's fatigued. So if you're doing 5 exercises in chest, the intensity by the end, you might as well be training another muscle group. And then you get another dosage later on in the week to train chest a couple more times. And the total volume throughout the week is far greater by breaking it up. And in my early days of PT, I didn't know any of this stuff. Yeah. And I don't think we were as knowledgeable. So I'd smash the fuck out of muscle groups once a week. And in the first few years of training, I got some results. But my results quickly slowed with myself and my clients. And I had to go and start to research this stuff a little bit more, go on some more courses and go, oh, actually, now I'm learning a little more about the science, going back to that again, then I could use the science and practically apply that to my sessions. So my programming changed with myself and with my clients. Obviously, I worked with other coaches, which is really useful. And ultimately, everyone got better results because I started to learn more.
And volume and intensity, so you've got frequency, volume and intensity. And so really that's what you're looking for across a week of a program. And really you're looking to get enough of that in across a week rather than trying to smash it all in one day. And that's why you can manipulate these things. You know, you can take my program at the moment, I've got more exercises. So I'm being pushed more within a given exercise, but for less sets. And then I've got more exercises across a program. So that's where Paul's initially set me up, because you can play with these things around what a person wants to get out of their training, some areas they want to bring up, so you can get some more frequency, some more volume into those areas. As you should say, you can split it across a week so that you're not absolutely battering something that then has got proper DOMs the next day and you're able to perform well. And we need to take all these things into account, that if we take the volume across a week or the intensity across a week, that's going to be far better. It's like calories when we get to the fat loss limit. We can take calories day to day, but we could take a week as well and go, right, you are someone that's going to eat more on the weekend. That's just the way you want to live your life. That's fine. The trade-off is you're going to have to eat less during the week, let's say. But we can take your 2,000 calories a day, that's 14,000 calories a week, and we can sort of slice and dice that in different ways. It doesn't have to be 2,000 calories a day. So again, we can look at most of these things across a week to make sure we're getting in what we need to get in. But frequency, now I'm sure I read it in Brad Schoenfield actually. Hope I did, because that's what I'm going to say it's from. That once men got over the age of 30, actually frequency became more important. Now, I don't know whether I'm just throwing down something out there that I read years ago that's disproven now, or people have gone in a different direction, but I do remember reading that in one of his books, that actually you want to be getting your a particular muscle group in at least a couple of times a week or every 3 to 4 days. So that's an interesting part with frequency. Not always leaving it 7 days before you train that body part again.
I think the older we get, we just need to get a bit more intelligent anyway.
Yeah.
Like at a 20-year-old, fucking hell, your testosterone's really high, your recovery's really good, you're at a good time to adapt, aren't you? Not that you're not at 30 or 35 or into your late 30s to adapt. It's just a bit tougher, mate.
Just shoved out there, didn't you?
How old am I now?
40.
I forget now. But ultimately, I think we need to be a bit more intelligent. And a lot of clients I train are 40s, 50s and 60s. So, yeah, me taking, 65-year-old Bob for a whole hour on legs, loads of volume, it's just not needed, is it? No. Really, as well. So it's we have to take age into the equation, and I think just train a bit smarter and think a little bit more about. You mentioned at the beginning about joint health and stuff like that. Like just take all that into consideration. I think that links me back into. I've just remembered my point from about half an hour ago, mate, which was feedback. Yeah. Feedback from the client. So this links back to what I was talking about earlier. I forgot my point. I've remembered it. Thank God. It took me a while.
What was the point?
So the point was feedback. So ultimately, we were chatting about DOMs and selecting exercises and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We try and again get the appropriate stressor. But then next week when they come in, how do they feel after the session? Because you might think, you know what? Have I pushed them enough? Have I not? We don't know exactly. It's not exact science. And I might go, I felt really good, or bloody hell, I really ate for a while. Someone's come in and said they really ate, like massively. I'm like, okay, well maybe I'll do the same dosage or a little bit less. If they feel fine, then I know that previous dosage from the week before was okay.
Yeah.
So I either do the same or I can creep it up a little bit. So I think feedback during the session, but almost post-session, tells us a lot. And I'll talk a lot about that in muscle building, but even more in rehab.
Yeah.
Because again, we mentioned, didn't we, with the rehab stuff that I went through with you, it's getting that dosage right. It isn't an exact science.
Sorry, mate, I'm listening. I just got a text. A client very text me. I'm being rude. But
Unbelievable.
Just as a client, the client, I just saw it flick up. I was like, I actually need to get back. I'm on fucking camera. Well, that's the only reason I said it. Otherwise, that's how I normally do. When James is talking, I've been busted now. Like, yeah, mate. Saying some real shit. I'll be back in a minute.
But no, feedback is such a key point with.
I think it's hugely
getting
important.
Dosage. You might be again in thinking about back pain as something that I've worked with quite a lot of clients. I'm trying to get the right dosage around movement and their spine. And get some feedback. But not until next week they come and how do you feel? Like, you know what, James, I felt really good after that session. Or actually, I enjoyed it, but back felt a bit stiff. Okay, great, that's important information. I might then also go, well, what does that mean to you if your back feels a bit stiff? My back's fucked. Okay, right, I can help work that belief system, because aching isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just maybe we don't need to chase it for muscle building, which is what you were talking about earlier. So, and that's a key concept. A lot of people, I quite like a little bit dumb, so I know I've worked. But if I'm chasing that every session and then thinking I haven't had a good workout because I'm not aching, that is probably unhelpful. And I think that's what you were talking about.
That's the important part. People seeing more, say, muscle damage from an eccentric load, and then sort of chasing that, and it's like we want to keep a nice controlled movement. We want some good mechanical tension in this. So that's why we want a nice controlled tempo, especially on the eccentric. We might going to be a bit more powerful on the concentric, but we don't want to be chasing it. That's a good way of putting it. That's really what. So you take all the research. That's where it's applied. Like, we don't want to be chasing muscle damage. Don't be start coming in and going, I'm trying to build muscle. My client hasn't had it, therefore you're going to get bad today because we're not going to get muscle. We're not going to get skeletal muscular hypertrophy (SMH) without it. I just wanted to bring you quickly back into the path of motion.
Yeah.
One of the things you learn on mechanics, and this is where joint health comes in, is you really learn about the path of motion, especially within machines or cables and things. And this is going to be so much better for someone's joint health if we've just got it nicely aligned. And that's where mechanics is really nice. You set up the machine or the cables or whatever really nicely for someone where it really matches the path of motion. So the line of resistance and the joint moving in a nice congruent path. It's going to be probably better for your joint health over a long period of time. Doesn't mean you train any less hard, like you still train hard, but it's just a nicer smooth.
Well, if anything, yeah, feel better. Does it? Everything allows you to train a bit harder.
Yeah.
So I mean, joints need a bit of stress.
Yeah.
Where joints can adapt a little bit. How they adapt is a little bit different to maybe a muscle, but there can be some joint adaptation. Sometimes people are overprotected of their joints. I've worked with a lot of people with like knee pain and just don't do anything on their knee.
Yeah.
And the knee has to go for some sort of stress.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we're trying to really grow a set of quads, and you talked about longevity earlier on, and you're pushing yourself really hard on the hat squat, the leg press, the leg extension, your knee could be thinking, whoa, this is a little bit irritable now because we haven't got the right line of force, the machines aren't set up optimally. If we go back 10 or 20 years, there's a lot of people who are training for a long period of time, they're all getting injured.
Yeah.
You saw injuries time and time again, and that's because they're training fucking hard, high intensities. Those are the people where it really matters.
Yeah.
Betty who's just doing a little bit of movement and doing some... Not saying it doesn't matter, and we can still consider it, but the higher the intensity, that really starts to matter the higher up the chain you go, essentially. If you've got people who want to train fucking hard 4 or 5 times a week and build muscle and continue to for a long time, I think this stuff matters even more up those high ends. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think that's just so important.
It depends on the exercise, depends on the person. If it's a machine, there'll be a way to set it up that's best for them in terms of...
I'm not saying it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I know you. No, because I agree. The higher
yeah.
you go, the better. And then Cal was on a podcast with Paul and James the other day, and he was talking about it and saying that's what they're looking at the longevity of his trainers. He was talking about a couple of the people he trains, a couple of pros, and he's looking at longevity. So can he design a program that allows them to fucking train as hard as they need to, but not fucking? I think he called them dust. They ended up with joints of dust, So talks about that. So definitely further up the chain, but. With machines, one of the things we'll talk about, or I'll talk about in the seminar, is actually how do you set up a quad extension? And this is one of the things I learned from mechanics, is like what we're going to effectively do is line up the axis of the machine with the axis of the joint being the knee. And it's just a little thing, like quite often when people might just need to internally rotate the femur and then back rest, just make sure it's in the position where the knee lines up with the axis of the machine. Couple of little points. And it just means you've then set the machine up around the person as much as you can, because the machine's not going to move that much, of course. And it's just likely going to be better for their joints as they're working through, especially if you're talking about a considerable period of time. I'm not talking if you haven't done that for the last year, everyone's fucked. I'm just saying long term, if we set that up, maybe it's going to be better for people's joints going forward. And I have to be honest, since I've done it, it feels better for me. I feel better with it because the path of motions are like, you're not fighting in a different plane, which is different with machines versus like free weights, because there's different stuff going on there. But within machines, there's a way to set people up. That looks different from person to person, but there's a couple of little things.
I mean, there is still joint stress, though, isn't there? Which
of course.
It's like, we're not taking
there's always joint stress.
There's always joint stress, and if your muscles adapting the joint can adapt a little bit as well.
It's one of the things we'll get into. Well, there's more advanced stuff when you start to look at joint forces. And you start to look at how everyone thinks that maybe it was out there that shearing force is a really bad force. Well, actually, it's a necessary force. So it's not. Let's demonise that. It's just a matter of understanding it and where is it appropriate, where is it not. And some of it we're not in control of. So if you've heard of joint forces or shearing forces, that's something we'll get into later down the line because that's quite key.
I want to link this back to what we talked about the other week, actually, about reasoning processes.
Yeah.
And actually, the more we start to learn, the more educated your reasoning process can be.
Yeah.
So you can be like, right, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, which is what you talk a lot about with mechanics. And I think it's the same with communication as well. Like, why am I having this conversation? Why am I deciding to use these words? Or why am I reflecting? There's always got to be a reason for it. Otherwise, we just become people who take people around the gym and talk to people, which maybe isn't a high-end coach. So with the mechanics stuff, the more you can learn a little bit about forces, and it hasn't got to be that technical, but a little bit does go a long way.
Does.
A little bit goes a long way.
Setting a machine up.
Yeah.
Just being super confident, like, come in, I know that quad extension set up well for you.
Yeah.
Your confidence then increases.
Yeah. And again, you mentioned longevity. Obviously, we want to try and reduce in our clients' injury.
Yeah.
Do you know, there's nothing worse than clients getting injured. So if we can reduce that, then brilliant. And if we can set up machines a little bit better, or exercise, or think a little bit more about appropriate stress or feedback, we can start to reduce the chance of injury, which is pretty important. I would say there's a lot of myths around injury, of course, but I think some of these are kind of some key things to think about, actually.
But it's when we're looking at, but I think the two biggest takeaways on this section really is, can we create mechanical tension? So the muscle, are we loading up that muscle and keeping it under tension for a period of time? And then are we training hard enough for that person to create an adaptation? So that's going to be the minimal effective dose or the maximal effective dose. Are they training hard enough? Like, for instance, if you have a client comes in and wants to train once a week and build a really good physique, that's unlikely, so we've got to be realistic with that. But if you can get those two things right, so with all the stuff we've said, mechanical tension, loading the muscle, and training hard enough.
Yeah.
And that's really...
And obviously maybe the recovery side is a whole other podcast.
I'd almost do that.
Sort of the nutrition and the rest, the
sleep,
stress management, all that sort of stuff, to help with performance, help with recovery, a separate podcast. But I would totally agree with that. And I think we're speaking a lot about muscle building, so we have to make sure there's the appropriate amount of stress. So I think that's key for muscle building.
Try not to get dragged too much into it. It has to be optimal. Above all else, like don't work too hard in case it's not optimal, whatever that looks like. And if you just train hard, like proper hard, but without any thought process behind anything, you probably get some results. Maybe it could lead to injury further down the line if we haven't quite got the setup right and you're pounding away hard for years at that. So just really looking more at longevity, really, more than anything else. Yeah. Not to say if someone goes in and fucking trains hard 4 days a week, 5 days a week, you're going to get some results, right? So it's more just the longevity. Can we set things up to get the best result for you?
We mentioned about age earlier, didn't we? If you're 20 years old, you find you can just smash those people up and your body bounces back a lot easier. But a lot of our clients aren't going to be 20 years old. And we mentioned about genetics, didn't I, as well? Like some people just genetically are maybe a bit more predisposed to injury. We see it's like high-level sports people seem to get, like footballers seem to get injured over and over again. Yeah. There's a genetic side to that. But also there's an environmental side, isn't it? So what we're in control of is creating the most optimal environment possible, or just the environment that the client's getting on with. It's not just about optimal, as you were saying. It's optimal for the person, isn't always optimal for muscle building. I think that's what we're trying to say.
Most people get confused with that, don't they?
Yeah,
optimal,
I must follow Brad Schoenfeld's exact advice.
Yeah.
You're like, actually, for this client in this context, no. This just doesn't work out well for their lifestyle. So they have to be able to think outside the box a little bit as well. Think about the person, not just the research.
Yeah, absolutely. That took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take. So should we do the fat loss bit?
Got time for just a little bit of fat loss.
Yeah.
Just links. I mean,
it links in really well.
Earlier on about the newbie stuff. I think that's really. I think you make a good point with that, Dan. About when someone comes in, very few people are really lean. Where you're like, right, let's put you straight into a surplus and a muscle building phase. As you said, we can put someone in a slight deficit, get them training properly for the first time, and really get some nice results out of people. And a lot of people actually come to us and they want to get. If you could think about how many out of people you train. Do more people want to get lean or do more people want to get massive?
Yeah.
It's a lot more people around fat loss, isn't it? It's probably the biggest goal that clients have. As personal trainers, we see a lot of people wanting to lose body fat. So it's a nice area to sort of think about. I mean, on that then, as we've got time to discuss it a little bit, what are your thought processes around it, mate? And how do you start to sort of go about it, I suppose?
Well, if someone wants to lose weight?
Yeah.
Fat. Yeah, I think it's important because it's one of those things, getting a bit of body fat off people, like I say, getting them used to a bit of training, getting them used to some of maybe, depending on what level they are, the variables they'll need to look at and control, and also for them to see a difference relatively quickly. 6 to 8 weeks of fat loss, you can see a big difference in your physique, and then build from there rather than almost going into a gaining phase whilst you're carrying too much body fat already. Isn't maybe the best platform to go from. Not that it might not work for people, but so I would, with general population, tend to get into a bit of fat loss. This is going to look, obviously I'm going to put people into a calorie deficit, but how you apply that is going to look different from person to person. Not everyone's going to be on MyFitnessPal. However, I do have a bit of a preference for general population clients who really have no understanding around calories and how much they're eating. From an educational point of view, I quite like it because I've seen results anecdotally where I just sometimes get people to track for a couple of weeks just so they can see how many calories they're consuming. And start to realise how many calories are in things. We can start to maybe look at some protein. Most people undereat protein, eat too many calories. So I quite like it as an educational point of view. Very few of my clients are on tracking like that long term because they just don't need to. But as an educational point of view, if someone's... and I tend to... Obviously, we've got the different... the name always escapes me. The equations for working out people's BMR, and then figuring out from there what their total daily energy expenditure should be. I actually quite like people just coming in, and if they are going to track, just track what you're doing at the moment, and let's see over a couple of weeks how that looks, and then we can decide what we want to do from there. For other people who don't want to track at all, it might be stuff like reducing alcohol intake during the week. There might be some stuff straight away. You just say to them, look, what things do you reckon you could do? And actually straight away there's a couple of things for those real general population clients just want to lose a bit of weight. So what do you reckon you could do this week? And quite often they'll say, do you know what, I've had a couple of drinks each evening, I don't need that, so I'm quite happy to take that out. Or at the desk at work, I'm constantly smashing crisps or whatever, so sometimes it's these real obvious little things that you can make quite a difference on straight away. So I think in reality, we all know we're going to put people into a calorie deficit of some sort, but the question is, how does that look for clients? Well, that's going to depend on the person and what's going to work best for them. But as I say, I've just found personally that actually having a little track for a bit for people that have never done it before, I think is quite educational. I think it just gives people an understanding of calories, how easy it is to overeat, how maybe little protein they do get. So some of these things, which I like straight away, increasing your protein, I think it's useful. There's obviously lots of other tips you can get in, obviously increasing your fruit and veg and getting more fibre in. It's going to keep you feeling fuller for longer, as obviously adding more protein into your diet. So there are these other things as well that you can add. I know that's a few different caveats in that, but it's going to look different from client to client. What about yourself, mate?
I think it depends on who's in front of us, doesn't it? Which is an easy, obvious thing to say, I suppose. Going back to formulas, yeah, I think something like the Harris Benedict formula tends to be the one that most apps will use. The Harris Benedict formula, and they'll give people a rough idea. It's a start point. It's a start point, and great, nothing wrong to go down that road at all. I think and again, it's just a personal thing now. The people that I would tend to work with would be more people they're not physique people. Not to say that if you're not a physique person, you couldn't follow calories, but maybe there's some real stubborn behaviours. They might come in quite motivated potentially and want to change some things, but the type of people that I would see, and hence why I'm very passionate about behaviour change, and actually our seminar, the second part that I'm doing, the communication part, is vital for the behaviour change. I'm almost setting trainers up to help the behaviour change conversation, but without the listening skills and the soft skills and the reflections and the understanding, we don't set up that. So we can, as trainers, you and me can sit here and come up with loads of different ideas for fat loss. We could do a whole podcast on different strategies. And I think they're great. I definitely, with what you say about easy wins, I love that. Well, I didn't know easy wins. I don't think that's what you specifically said, but that's what you were going, look, what can a client do? And what do they think that they can do really easily? Love all that. And that can move someone forward really fast. But the subject of thinking, like, why are they struggling? What are their barriers? What are they telling you that they're really struggling with? And over time, great, let's get some results quickly. But for a lot of people who I work with, I'm sure you've seen this as well, Dan, there's some real stubborn, ingrained behaviours. And we have to start to understand what's going on a little bit mentally, a little bit emotionally, and understand that behaviour a little bit more over time if we're going to make these long-term changes. Because clients will come in and they might be motivated when they start with you, and there's 12 weeks of fat loss, but guess what? Life happens or a challenge happens, and then they come off the wagon a little bit. So how do we create behaviours or help support new behaviours for the long term and maintain those behaviours? And we've done a previous podcast on behaviour change where I would have spoken a little bit about this. There will be future podcasts on the subject in a bit more detail, because I think when it comes to fat loss, it's more about the behaviours and just the knowledge. I think a lot of people have got a basic knowledge, not to say we can't educate a little bit more, but helping and supporting behaviour change, through my experience, is the game changer fat loss. I don't know how you feel about it, but again, I realise that's the lens that I've seek, the type of people that I work with. But it's just so important, I find.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because I've personally found education and success have been two big ones. Most people come and say, "I need to move more and eat less," right? But they just sort of throw it out there, and they forget that actually their version of eating less doesn't mean that they've massively reduced their calories, because you can get some pretty processed food that's got a lot of calories in it. I completely agree with behaviour change and understanding their reasoning process for it. And sometimes it's both ways. So sometimes understanding yourself and why you want it can help you success, and you probably, with the way that you look at things, would lead to longer term success. But sometimes I've found that coming in and getting early success and then reflecting on it can be a great way as well. So like the action has led to the reflection, not always the reflection has led to the action. And I'm sure depending on who it is, they both work. It just depends on what's right for the person and where they have that light bulb moment. So mine's anecdotally, I've found that them getting success and starting to maybe achieve some fat loss, and then understanding as to why that is, with a little bit more of an in-depth than just eating less or moving more, though we can all agree that's pretty fundamentally what happens, but not quite. But then I think it's important, if you're going to do it the way that I do it around, it's important to reflect on that and still understand it moving forward to keep sustained success. But there'll be other clients as well where they come in and it is you feel like you do need to. I feel like I need to talk to them more, and so why are you really looking to do that? Isn't it important value of yours? Those clients that come in and really say they want to do it but don't really make the change. So it's easy when a client comes in, you give them some stuff to do and they make the change. What about those clients that come in and say they want to make the change, but then you try and work around them as many different times as you can, but they don't actually make the change, which is the behaviour change, right? Then you have to have the ability to go deeper with them and understand, well, do you really want this? Why are we not being able to find that thing that's going to enable you to put the things in place to get this? And that's what you do have to understand deeper. Because most people understand the actual mechanism for losing weight, right? But a lot of people don't do it. So the question then is, well, why don't you do it? Is that really what we're getting at to?
Yeah, I mean, most people would understand, I suppose, that you need to expend more calories than you take in. A lot of people, everyone's got their own little
there's like people bad with money, isn't it?
Happen.
I know, and you earn this much money, but they still spend more money than they earn. Doesn't mean they don't understand why you're doing it.
Yeah, so I suppose I always find it curious into how long someone has struggled for. It doesn't always work like this, but if someone's struggled with losing weight and it's been a decade or a couple of decades, it's probably got some real ingrained stubborn behaviours. Me telling them something that they've already heard, why is this going to change this time? If I've heard in the consultation they've struggled with this and this and this and this and nothing's really changed, I've got to have a different strategy here. And sometimes I've had conversations where clients have said to me, no one's ever sort of really listened to me properly about my problem. They've just, every trainer I've seen has just told me what I need to do. And started off keen because it's a new trainer, it's a new environment, and they've told me I can achieve these great results, but I'm still stuck here time and time again. So again, I know this is a bias of mine, but also it's a stronger skill set of mine to really start to understand what is going on beneath the surface, why are we struggling. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, I've got a long way to go, but it's something that I'm personally very passionate about. I like the stubborn stuff, a bit like persistent pain. I like working with people, persistent pain or any persistent struggle. That's where I get my excitement from, because I'm like, we need to go a little bit deeper here. The surface level thing of just giving someone a few planks for their back pain or a bit of mobility for their back pain or a calorie plan to follow for fat loss isn't going to work for those people. And then I'm like, right, now we're going. And guess what? I've got clients I've trained for years and they're still struggling. I don't come up with a perfect formula, and it's a process over time, and we're just trying to move the needle forward for some people. Maybe they aren't going to lose stones and stones. Maybe it's just improving their lifestyle a little bit, improving their health. So these conversations are just really, I get a lot of excitement from them personally, but they are difficult. They are challenging because you're dealing with people's emotions sometimes, and some of the things you'll get back can be quite irrational, can be quite emotional, can be quite childlike sometimes. And you've got to deal with that as a coach and go, oh, I've created that for myself. now we can explore that a little bit if we really want to see behaviour change. So it's a massive subject, behaviour change. I just feel it's something we have to kind of talk about with fat loss, because there's got to be some sort of change of behaviour, hasn't there, if we're going to lose weight. Some people, we've all got this with trainers. Some clients are great, aren't they? They pretty much do it, and they've got some good habits and behaviours. They haven't been too stubborn. They respect you. They listen to you. Great. That isn't going to be 100% of your client base. It just won't be if you work with the general population. How about the people who are really struggling? Do we just put our hands up and go, well, they just don't want it enough, they don't value it enough, is what it is? Or do we just think, you know what, okay, maybe they won't quite get where they think they want to, but I can still help and support that person by developing some of these skills that I've alluded to today in previous podcasts, and we'll talk about a lot more in the seminar.
Yeah, it's my biggest pet hate. Oh, they just didn't want it enough. All the responsibility onto them. It's their fault. It's their fault. It's not mine. Because the easiest, probably someone, not I'm saying Paul's got an easy job, but someone like me who has got a decent level of knowledge and just actually wants some accountability, fancy someone else from writing their programs, they can take that thought process out, set me my calories, that's great, I don't want to think about that, but I can put that into place. I mean, I'm probably a relatively easy client, right? Unless I really fuck it up. But that's on me.
But they're the great testimonials, aren't they? Yeah, the people who are a bit younger, who haven't got maybe as much sort of the kids
already massed and shredded,
already peeled, already just in amazing shape. You know, What mirror have you got, mate? But yeah, it's great. We see testimonials all the time, don't we?
Yeah.
Great, all for that. That's the business people are going for. But they're the people who it work for. They're the people who maybe were alive.
I've always said that on Instagram.
How about people didn't work for?
On Instagram,
yeah.
I now want testimonials from every client you ever work with.
Yeah.
And then we can start to see how does it look. Not because I'm trying to put that trainer down, because you're then making a more realistic view of the clients you've worked with and clients it's gone well with, maybe clients hasn't gone so well with. And it's not always their fault and it's not always your fault. But yeah, those people that you have to work longer term with to really try and help actually understand, not just say they didn't value it enough, because that's your opinion of what they should value, right? So it's not about that. It's understanding what do they value, where are they at, do they really want to do it? Is now not the right time to do it? I've had some clients that they've had so much shit going on. It's like, it's not the right time. Let's just keep your training, because you now going into a calorie deficit, which you find stressful and painful, and not that they're that lean, it's going to be painful, but just applying it all and maybe giving up some stuff they enjoy at a time when maybe they're going through some shit. I was going to say, ended up with shit. Maybe now's not the right time. I've said that to clients. Maybe now's not the right time. Let's keep you training. Let's keep you as healthy as possible. Let's not go further away from being healthy, but let's maybe not put more stress on you right now. And so understanding that I think is really important.
It's such a good point, mate. Such a good point. I mean, I suppose on the testimonial side, you obviously, if you're marketing, you're going to put stuff out there. I get it. So, that makes perfect sense. But yeah, on the behaviour change side, and I've mentioned this before as well, as trainers, we push for change. And maybe we just say to a client, is now the right time for you to be dieting? I don't know, but I'm just curious, do you think it's the right time? If they still go, yeah, I really want to go for it, like, okay, let's go for it, but let's also have a bit of compassion that you've got this going on, this
family,
you've got
family, job,
you've got all this stuff, you've got a lot of stress right now. Maybe you could just maintain now, and then maybe we'll aim for a fat loss phase here, potentially, and you can have a discussion, and you can have that together. It's just setting in those expectations again, isn't it? And just taking into consideration, helping the client see what challenges that they've got, and going, great, we either figured this out together to move the needle forward with fat loss, or we go, right, you know what, you've got a holiday here, you've got a party there, you've got that going out, you've got Christmas, maybe actually we just look to maintain, and we can come up with a plan to maintain, so when you go into January, you're in a place to push again. These are important conversations, otherwise people feel like they're failing, I haven't achieved what I'm supposed to. Maybe because the goals and expectations were just a bit unrealistic. Who's losing weight in December? I know I'm not. So maybe my clients aren't going to either. If they want to,
get that together.
What do you mean you haven't dropped a stone at Christmas?
Well, I think that's the thing. It's the expectations, destroyer of happiness. I see someone say that. But if you've set an unrealistic expectation and then feel that you failed because you didn't reach the unrealistic expectation, that's quite a negative loop. I've actually got to jump off because I've got a session. Badly fucking timed session, isn't it?
Unbelievable.
I reckon maybe we should do Fat Loss Part 2 next week and get into behaviour change and get into some more nitty-gritty.
Go a little bit deeper. Yeah, and if you guys have any questions on this, ping us a DM, because I'm happy to expand a little bit more on it next week anyway, behaviour change, because there's a few areas to go down.
Let's do next week. Should we do Fat Loss and behaviour change, so we can finish that off, because we need to get geeky in that, and we can go into loads more behaviour change as well.
Part 2 next week.
Because we've got me and you got our weeks wrong, because the guest one is 2 weeks today.
Yeah.
2 weeks tomorrow. So next week's a normal one. So yeah, we'll do fat loss and behaviour change.
Part 2.
Part 2. So we've done a bit of muscle building today, and a little introduction to fat loss. But that's too big a subject to cut off there, I think, isn't it?
Yeah,
Don't just really get
we'll
into that.
Expand on it a little bit more, Phil, next week.
And you can blame. Well, I was going to say you can blame my client for me having to jump off. I'm the one that fucking booked it in. Definitely
Yeah.
my fault.
Dan-
narrative, bullshit narrative.
Dan's shit admin
It's
today.
my fucking. Yeah, it was my shit admin as well. Right. So, did you want to cut it? Oh, by the way, our stuff's all up on Linktree. But if you want to register interest in future seminars,
we're sort of alluding to some of the stuff that we're covering in the seminar.
Yeah.
The mechanical tension stuff, and mechanics is going to be a big part of it. And the communication side for behaviour change, whether that's for fat loss, whether it's to help someone mentally and emotionally, we'll start to bring that into the seminar as well. So click on the Linktree, let us know you're interested, because we'll look at putting on dates for the seminar next year. Thanks for listening, guys, and we will speak to you next week.